I was running by a homeless shelter, and one morning when I was running, there was a street light there that turned red. And I remember looking back at the guys and I'm like, oh my God, why don't I start a running club for that homeless shelter? Like it just felt like such an obvious thing for me to do because of my dad, who is an addict. And I saw a lot of my dad and those guys when I was a teenager to deal with my dad's gambling addiction, which seemingly destroyed and tore apart my family. And I needed something to do with all my negative energy and emotions that I was feeling. So running became a safe haven. These guys are homeless. They have other issues to work through. And I just felt, well, running can actually help them work through those issues. So getting them physically, emotionally, mentally in shape will prepare them to become not homeless. It just made a lot of sense in my head based on my relationship with sport and exercise.
Awesome. I'm live with Anne Mahlum, founder of Solidcore and Ambition, and overall serial entrepreneur. And I'm going to call her a rock star. It's great to have you here today, Anne.
Thanks, John. Nice to be here.
Yeah, for those out there who maybe are not familiar with who you are and your work, can you give a quick introduction on yourself and what you've built and what you're building?
Sure. I guess I like to describe myself as an entrepreneur that likes to create and build things that enhance people's lives. I have done that in the health, fitness, and wellness space, both in the nonprofit and for-profit worlds. Yes, as you mentioned, am the founder of Solidcore, which is, for all intents and purposes, very athletic Pilates. People who think we are traditional Pilates and come to one of our studios are usually a little shocked at the experience. We took traditional Pilates and really intensified it to make it the type of workout that I was attracted to, which is again a more athletic workout. And Pilates is such an amazing base to moving our bodies and to making us strong. So for anybody who's tried Pilates and maybe wants something a little bit more again intense, I would suggest giving Solidcore a try. In addition to the workout, it's done in a very cool space, dark room, blue lights, loud music, mirrors, and awesome coaches. So definitely recommend that. And then, yeah, I also just started a new fitness and wellness company last year, or this year actually was when we first opened, called Ambition. So we opened in Brooklyn Heights in March and have two more locations opening in June in Manhattan. And we can talk all about that. And I guess prior to Solidcore, I was the founder and CEO of Back on My Feet, which is a nonprofit that I started in 2007 that uses running as a vehicle to help people living in homeless shelters become more self-sufficient.
Hmm. A lot to unpack there. And it's amazing that after the growth and success of Solidcore, you've decided to do it all over again.
Tell me, some days I'm like, what am I doing? But yes.
Yeah. But I love to kind of start with how you even got into Solidcore and maybe what you learned through your first venture back on my feet, because it sounds super mission driven and social impact focused. How did you even come? What were you in the midst of? Like, who were you when you started back on my feet? Where were you in your life, and how did that then lead you to starting a boutique fitness studio?
Great questions, because it's not a very linear path, as it may sound. I was in a place that I think a lot of people find themselves at least once, maybe twice, three times in their own life, which is lost and trying to find purpose and fulfillment and passion, purpose, all of those things. And the only thing that was really stable in my life was running, and it just made me feel so strong and invincible. I became a runner when I was a teenager to deal with my dad's gambling addiction, which seemingly destroyed and tore apart my family. And I needed something to do with all my negative energy and emotions that I was feeling. So running became a safe haven. And 10 years later, I was running by a homeless shelter that was, not even a quarter mile away from my place in Philadelphia where I was living at the time. And John, I had literally walked and ran by that homeless shelter thousands of times over the 2 years that I had lived there before really taking notice of the people hanging outside the shelter. And for whatever reason, I kind of like to think there was a higher power at hand, something in the universe answering my calls of looking for purpose. And, fortunately and unfortunately, it was in front of me the whole time because running by this homeless shelter in May, I began to connect with the guys that I would see, and it quickly, like truly a light bulb. I One morning when I was running, there was a street light there that turned red, and I remember looking back at the guys, and I'm like, "Oh my God, why don't I start a running club for that homeless shelter?" Like it just felt like such an obvious thing for me to do because of my dad, who is again an addict, and I saw a lot of my dad and those guys in my relationship with running. It took a little bit more convincing to get other people to see what I saw, but that's usually the case with any entrepreneur. And I called the shelter and, kind of begged him and pursued him pretty aggressively to let me start a running club because he was pretty adamant, the director of the shelter, that, nobody living there would be interested in running. These guys are homeless. They have other issues to work through. And I just felt, well, running can actually help them work through those issues. So getting them physically, emotionally, mentally in shape will prepare them to become not homeless. It just, again, made a lot of sense in my head based on my relationship with sport and exercise. So I started this running club and really quickly realized that this was going to be so much more than just a running club, that it actually was going to be the catalyst, or it could be, to a bigger program that could work with members, get them in this more stable, again, physical, emotional well-being and in a better sense of self. And then once we did that, we could place them in jobs and homes and be their network and resource, and sort of serve as a placement agency and go work and build and create relationships with for-profit companies that would be looking to hire, folks like our members and give them a shot of getting back in the workforce. And I'll tell you what, John, one, the program works, and two, we didn't really make phone calls to corporations like Marriott, who's the organization's largest employer as well, and say, "Hey, can you like hire Donald? Because, we're a charity and we really appreciate you doing us a favor." We made phone calls like, "Hey, Donald is somebody that we would be really honored to recommend to you. He shows up 3 days a week at 5:30 in the morning. The dude is never late. In fact, he's 10 minutes early, positive attitude, respects and supports his teammates. And we think this would make a great team member, for your establishment." And we would place a lot of members through our program in jobs like that by simply watching their behavior and watching them make the right decision and earning their way to, another chance or a second chance at having a more stable life. So it was really fun. That was an amazing time of my life. And there's a lot more to this story. I could probably take up the next 45 minutes talking about the beginning stages of that, and me making the call of like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to actually build this into a fully funded nonprofit. I'm going to raise money, hire staff, because for any entrepreneur listening, I was told I was nuts and like almost like crazy and just Pollyanna by anybody that I would ask of like, "I'm going to do this thing. What do you think?" People thought I was stupid. There was like concern for my safety, thought I was being irresponsible, again, admirable of wanting to help people, but how could I possibly think this was going to be my career? And it turned out to work out. And I think when we're faced with moments like that, when we are so driven to do something that nobody understands, we find ourselves asking questions like, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? And what you realize is the worst case scenario is really not that bad. And in my case, worst case scenario in my mind was this just doesn't work, right? The novelty of the running wears off, it gets cold, the guys quit. What I think the vision could be turns out not to actually turn into something. Like that's the worst case scenario, and I thought I could recover from that. But the best case scenario was I'm actually right, and I can change identity through sport and help a lot of individuals see for themselves that they are capable and deserving of a whole lot more. And the best case scenario outcome was just like, I at least got to try. I at least got to try and see if I can do this. So that was really the start of my entrepreneurial journey, and I grew that organization to 12 cities across the country. We had about $6 million operating budget. all privately funded, 50 staff, hundreds of volunteers, if not thousands. And we help thousands of members move out of homeless shelters into more independent living by first focusing on their emotional well-being through physical sport. And it still operates today, almost, I guess, yeah, 15 years old, and is now in 15 different cities, and very stable, and continues to work.
That's amazing. I guess I have 2 questions before we transition to, Solidcore. Is there like, what did you learn? I guess you saw the what goes into an entrepreneurial venture of investing, believing, thinking about the most positive outcome versus the most negative outcome, sort of this optimistic point of view. What did you learn about sort of the trial and tribulations of entrepreneurship? Like, what didn't work out in that first venture?
Well, everybody says this, but if you know kind of how hard, like when you reflect of how hard and how much work things would have been, you probably wouldn't have done it. So you have the benefit of just not knowing. And I had that in both, for profit and nonprofit. And then we'll talk about ambition and why I'm doing this again, I'm sure at some point, because it's a different answer. But what didn't work out? One, I didn't expect the emotional turmoil that came along with Back on My Feet, meaning there was a lot of recidivism, right? There was a lot of guys that quit, that didn't make it, that, found their addictions again. And, it's hard not to take some of that stuff personally, especially from my personal relationship with my father and his own addictions. It brought up a lot of old wounds that were difficult for me to process. So a lot of my personal and emotional familial life was embedded in this nonprofit. So I feel like I had a lot riding on it. I almost was trying to heal myself by healing other people, which obviously, you can't force anybody else to change for you. They have to want to change for themselves. So there was a lot of, I think, even more so unexpected emotional turmoil and ups and downs through Back on My Feet, that I didn't expect there. And that was probably the hardest thing. And listen, I think I quickly sort of adapted to expectations. One, I was a first time CEO, and I had no idea how to manage people or really lead people. So I would just hire people based off of their potential and their passion. And, quickly obviously learned that passion and potential doesn't equate to somebody's skill sets to be able to deliver on responsibilities. I treated that nonprofit like a business. I was really clear on metrics, and that we just aren't a running club that's existing within the homeless community, right? We are using running as a vehicle to help people get out of their situation at homeless shelters. Therefore, we have to see the efficacy of our programs. We have to understand our success rate, how we need to pivot. So that was more than I guess I expected, because a lot of people come work for nonprofits because they're so passionate. And there can be a little bit of like a push and pull, or yin and yang on, quantifying passion with outcome and results based on people's expectations. So I had a lot to learn on leading and managing people, that I frankly had to go through and learn the hard way. And I think there's only so much you can read and educate yourself until you're in it, and really learning your own sense of leadership, and again, what works and what doesn't, and being open to feedback to you really understand how to lead.
Yeah, and the other place that I'm curious to understand your perspective on, now that now I know you worked in that world, is around homelessness today. I've never seen it so prevalent in places like LA, and I think I sometimes, like you, in that situation where you were running by them and not necessarily thinking about helping them, or maybe even thinking of them as on the same level as you and thinking about their potential. Uh, I go through that, and I'm just like, oh man, like there's trash everywhere. There's so much pollution, and sometimes not humanizing folks in that situation. And I'm curious if you have any perspectives on going through that experience on homelessness today and potential. It's such a multifaceted and nuanced issue, and but whether you have any perspectives on how we can relieve some of that pressure. Is it still what Back on My Feet was doing? Is there more government? regulation or input? How do we get through and resolve homelessness?
So truth be told, I'm just not as involved with the issue today as much as I was back then. I'm not really up to speed on, policies or, white papers and what the experts and people dealing with the issue on the ground or even a policy as much as I used to be. But listen, the reality is everybody working on homelessness, in my perspective, whether you're a homeless shelter or trying to solve the issue after people become homeless, we're all band-aids. You're never going to eradicate homelessness by approaching it after it happens, right? It's kind of like, health and wellness is no different. Of You got to get people making the right decisions. Otherwise, you just put people on medication to solve for, heart disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, all of these things, until you go back and figure out why are people becoming homeless to begin with and try to solve those issues. And all Back on My Feet members, 99% of them, became homeless through addiction and had burned a lot of bridges. Of course, their addiction drove a lot of their decision making, and it became their number one priority. And at some point, they were like, I can't do this anymore, and wound themselves up in programs and homeless shelters trying to get their life back on track. But I think it's important to remember, as you talk about the humanization of somebody who is experiencing homelessness, which is, frankly, even if you notice how I phrase that, we often call people homeless people and it defines them, but it's not who they are, right? Like, it's somebody experiencing homelessness. They have a much larger identity than just homeless. So I think it's really being honest and be like, gosh, think about what it must have taken for somebody who's a 46-year-old man to wind up at a homeless shelter. How much different that person's life, childhood, upbringing, experiences, environment, school system, neighborhood was so much different than somebody who doesn't end up there, because there's a lot of data and statistics on this, right? And so we have to have, in my mind, some sense of empathy and sympathy and understanding that that individual's life more than likely set them up for a very difficult life to be successful. And I saw that all the time with our Back on My Feet members. Very rarely did our members come from stable homes, from, affluent neighborhoods. It just like wasn't happening, right? There was all these circumstances working together that really limited that individual's opportunity for success in a lot of ways.
Got it. Yeah. Like you said, we could probably talk about Back on My Feet for another few hours, but I definitely want to learn a little bit more about how you transitioned to Solidcore. What was your experience like building the organization and the company to where it is today?
Yeah, so this is where I sort of say, like, I'm an entrepreneur who likes to make people's lives better. When I started to feel the knock of entrepreneurship, like, like happening in my mind again, I was like, "Ooh, like, wait, what? Like, I'm supposed to go do something else?" I was really trepidatious around that, because I was like, most people don't get one thing to work out. And I got this thing to work, and my life is so fulfilled. I'm helping people. And I frankly was getting a lot of accolades in the media and awards and, like, you name it, for the work I was doing. And I felt pretty special. My ego was very stroked at Back on My Feet. And there was a lot of it that made sense. But at the end of the day, I felt my talents and skill sets, I knew how to go to these markets, open cities, get them set up, open chapters, I'm sorry, get them set up, get them stable, get them funded, and then go do it again. And so I had been doing that for the last 4.5 years after we started expanding. And I sort of felt like I did my job. I put a board in place. I have a really financially stable organization with reoccurring funding happening. I've opened, again, 12 cities. I've written the playbook on how to do this. And it became a little bit repetitive or assembly line or playbooky. And I'm like, it's just not where my talents are best utilized and not where I get the most filled up. So the more that I just let myself feel and think about that, I was like, okay, like, I got to step up and I need to step into my next thing, whatever that is. I didn't know it at the time, but I said to myself, I just need to do what I did with Back on My Feet, which is pay attention. So I opened myself up for what could be next. And I was in Los Angeles for work, setting up the Back on My Feet chapter there. And I happened to stumble across a Pilates studio called Studio MDR. And I was like, oh, this is so cute. Like, how very LA. And I'm going to go take like a cute LA workout because I was a serious worker outer, right? I'm a marathoner. I've done every workout there is. Like, I thought jumping and pounding was a rite of passage to being fit. And so when I went and did this workout, I was like, oh my God, not only was that extremely challenging, but I've never worked out like that. I didn't know you could work out like that. And the next day, all of the areas of my body that I've been trying to, get toned, get strong, build muscle, were all like screaming and sore. And I was like, this is super interesting. So I went back to New York where I was temporarily living, and I went to go to a studio there that was also offering Pilates. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is going to be my next thing. I didn't see, at least from my perspective, anybody really doing this in a way that I thought it could be done. I am excellent at brand and community, and I just felt like I'm going to deliver this workout underneath a branded community in an authentic way that's going to make people's lives better. So it just was like, this is what I'm going to do next. And it was confusing for people, John, because exactly as you said, it's like here I go to, I'm working in social impact and using sport for social change and helping people in that way. And it's like, wait, Anne's going to start a high-end like fitness boutique studio. Like it didn't really make sense to people. But again, like it didn't really need to make sense to anybody else. I also knew that by choosing, this concept and a fitness studio that I could scale it. And that's really what I love to do. I wanted something, whatever my next thing was, to be able to scale it, to build it, to grow it. And that was a big requirement for whatever I was going to do next. And I frankly wanted to try my hand in the for-profit space. So I moved back to DC and got my first studio open in 2013, a little over 9 years ago. And very quickly, like I took all my money and put it into this studio. I was very bullish, obviously a little nervous, but that kind of commitment, especially financial commitment, when I'm like, I got to make this work. Like, not only do I believe in this, but like, I don't have a plan B here and this needs to work. So I put myself in that position of there's no security blanket or safety net here. And that can be really motivating. I actually look for that in entrepreneurs that I invest in today is, how much skin do they have in the game? And our first studio was very busy from pretty much the get-go. I got lucky with timing. There was no boutique fitness in Washington, D.C. at the time. So it was just like people were ready for it. It was an affluent market. People were very fit, spent a lot of time and energy and money into fitness. And we just provided a unique experience for them that they were ready for. So, seeing how well it was received, I knew that I had a big opportunity if I could just get speed to market. So, I opened 5 studios within the first, year of operating, and I just kept reinvesting the profits of Studio 1 to Studio 2, Studio 2 to Studio 3 to try to really get momentum and brand equity, around this type of workout and make myself known as like the key player. Like, oh, Anne already did that, so no one wants to compete with her. And that was a big part of our success of growing quickly and establishing ourselves in the space.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, considering, Pilates has been around for a while, and the Megaformer or the Legree machine that you had experienced at Studio MDR, and it sounds like maybe SLT in New York, uh, has been around as well, but it's always been like a market by market model where there's Studio MDR in LA and there's SLT in New York, and no one has scaled it with a uniform brand in the same way that you have done. Like, there's the Barry's boot camps, there's the Orange Theory fitnesses, there's F45, but you all were really the first brand that took this Megaformer type Pilates machine, but you guys created your own machine and scaled it in a way that is really unlike anything that any other company has done. What do you think it is or was about you and how you approached the problem that you were able to bring this into a reality? It's
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I was a Legree licensee. That's how I opened my first studio. So I had mega Yeah, so I had mega formers in the first studio and the first 4 or 5 studios that I did. And in my experience, the machines, were breaking a lot. And I never really understood the model of what I was paying for because it wasn't a franchise yet. I'm having to pay these fees that, normally franchisees have to pay to get sort of support and brand equity, yet I wasn't getting any of that. So I sort of felt like the model had all kinds of flaws, and legally I didn't feel like it was actually operating as it should. So a couple of things, I was like, I need to separate, and I need to make my own machines. I don't really want to be in business with Legree, and I also knew that in order for me to scale, I need to make my own machines. And I had been training my own people, and we had been evolving the workout to make it, fit sort of the athletic nature of what Solidcore was. We eliminated all these moves. And so Legree, which is public knowledge, we went through a lawsuit, and for all intents and purposes, we won, got to separate, give all the machines back, and like never have to talk to each other again. And so I, started the journey of making my own machines, John, which was frankly painful because I had never done that before, and there was a lot that I just didn't know. But it was one of those decisions, again, it's important that all founders and entrepreneurs, I think, ask themselves, there are these crucial moments when you think about what you want your business to be. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to build what I knew I could build if I didn't own my machines and the whole manufacturing process, from start to finish, to make the quality of machines that I was looking for and be in charge of the manufacturing. So that was really important part of our growth, of making that decision and going through that lawsuit and feeling confident of what that outcome was going to look like. And that allowed us to then be able to go anywhere where we wanted with that brand equity, where, as you mentioned, a lot of Studio MDR and SLT and some of these other Legree are uh, destined to their own particular jurisdiction, and they're not allowed to frankly grow beyond that due to like license agreements, right? So it was actually a very fertile ground for, like, I'm like, I know that I can be the category winner nationally by doing this. So there was just far too much upside and a calculated risk of knowing that, like, this is worth doing. And again, I feel like I'm going to win this argument here. So
good
yeah.
for you. Yeah, the other thing I've noticed about this category is, as a guy who's really super into fitness myself, have into resistance training, yoga, cycling, etc. It's just one of the most humbling exercises and types of classes that I've ever taken, but it's still predominantly women that are attending these classes. I know you all have a lot of male instructors, especially I saw in New York, and there's men that are slowly learning about this. I know a lot of professional athletes incorporate this type of exercise into their conditioning and strength and conditioning. But why, like, how do you think about the market sort of evolving to include more men, since it is such an effective workout, but people still
Yeah.
look at it as like something that's more feminine?
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that. One, as we look at the studios today, yes, we definitely have 80-85% women and 10 to 15%, men. And if we talk about sexual orientation, when people share that information with us, it's usually, gay men who are more so attracted to solid core than straight men, if I'm just being honest about our demographic. And one, the studios do really well. So there are wait lists upon wait lists with mainly women waiting to get in. So there's not a huge, as you think about solid cores, where you want to put marketing dollars when it's so easy to convert women. It has been so difficult for us to convert men because of their own notion of what they have in their head of either what Pilates is, So it's difficult to even come and get them in to try it. And when they do try it, there's actually two things that we've heard from people, from men coming into studios. One is that, you know, the men can feel a little uncomfortable when they're the only guy in the studio, because it is often where you'll see one or two men in a class of 15 to 17 women, and that makes them feel uncomfortable. They think they're making the women uncomfortable. Again, that's feedback that we've received. Secondly, men seem to find the workout very challenging. So it's not like they're frankly a little embarrassed of how they're able to perform in the workout, because it's targeting these muscles that they never really pay attention to, right? Like, I get really fit men, Brian Mazza, who's a good friend of mine, you know, and pretty big influencer in the space, super like ripped dude, very little body, got tons of muscles. And like, he'll tell you it was one of the most humbling experiences because he never works out like that. And Brian like hasn't come back a lot because it exposes these vulnerabilities, you know. And it's, I think, a lot for men to be like, wow, like that's something I got to get comfortable doing in a room with all women. So there's those elements that sort of make it easy for men to be like, I'll just go to, you know, lift heavy weights and go over here, especially when they're getting bulk and mass from those other areas. They have to really be wanting to work on the vulnerabilities that we expose at Solidcore.
Yeah. Yeah, I highly recommend it. I think uh the fact that there's 85% women in a class is a great reason for men to actually go to your
There you
classes.
go. Yeah, I know people say that's like there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of like fit, like, you know, badass women who take Solidcore. It's not an easy workout. So the type of person who takes Solidcore is, you know, ambitious, badass, wants to work hard, wants to be challenged. It's a really great community.
So you built Solid Core up. I know that there was a major inflection point as you went into COVID. I think you guys took on a huge round of funding. Could you give us a little bit of an understanding as to, you know, what's happened in the last few years, what's happened, you mentioned really recently in terms of some level of a milestone or turning point for the business, and then how you decided, okay, it's time for Anne to go out and start over and build again.
Yeah. So we took our first round of private equity funding in late 2017, and I was ready. Like, I had grown it to 25 studios by that point, and I was ready to like really pick up scaling. I was up for the challenge. I knew the product was great. I had enough market research to know that like we have something that's going to work in a lot of different markets across the country.
And sorry, Anne, was that 25 studios without any outside funding?
I had one individual who came in at $4 million, and that was frankly to help make the machines and go through the
Wow.
lawsuit.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. I just used the profits. Like, every dollar that the studios were spitting out, like, was going right back into growth and expansion.
That's amazing. Okay,
Um,
sorry, I cut you off. So
yeah,
you
that's okay.
took first private equity money in 2017.
Yeah. And I mean, we did exactly what I said we were going to do. And so from November 2017 to January of 2020, so not even 2.5 years, we went from 25 studios to 75 studios. So we had really great growth. Like, the model was set. I just needed the capital. I needed to hire some more talent, and like we were off to the races. And then you know, that year, John, I was like, okay, right, I've been at this, you know, for 6 plus years. We're at 75 studios. We're going to be at 100 at the end of the year. Like, I'm ready to sell. I always said I wanted to get us to 100 studios, and that like that would be my time to figure out what my next move or career was. At this point, I had an amazing COO that I had hired, who'd been with the company for, you know, 18 months or so, who just is a rock star, Brian Myers, who's actually our CEO today. But I was going to put Brian in the CEO role and, you know, take this money or take the company to market. And of course, you know, COVID hit, and you know, all of us can reflect off of that, but COVID was so fast. Like, it just happened so fast. We literally were like 2 weeks out, like, wait, something's happening going on here. And literally, without any warning, we were like, we have to shut down completely. It was very bizarre to think of that scenario. And so, you know, I am a little bit of a wartime CEO, so of course I wasn't going to leave the business, and we weren't going to sell at a discount. And it was like, great, we need to now navigate, strategize. How do we get through this? What decisions to make? We laid off everybody within 2 days, and that was really bold. We got a lot of flack for that because no one else had done it that quickly. But we were like, we don't have any money coming in, and we don't know when we're going to have money coming in. And one of our board members who worked at Marriott, he's like, we have more information than you guys do. You need to lay off your people. Like, this is not going away in 2 weeks, which, if you remember, John, people thought that. Like, people thought, okay, like, we have to shut down for a couple of weeks, and like, then we'll reopen. Like, people just, no one had any idea the longevity of what we were looking at for the disruption in the business, and not just the disruption. I mean, Solidcore was in 21 states at that point. Every single state had different approaches for how they were handling COVID, and they changed all the time. So we're like managing protocols over here, masks here, 12 feet away over here, 6 feet here. And that was really, really hard because our team, we didn't have one cohesive how we were going to be approaching this. We were really following local rules and regulations on how we could operate. And, again, internally, the team was very confused why in DC we had to do things one way, but Virginia, it was like, no masks, you guys can be open, even though it's literally a mile away across the river. It was very hard. Um, but anyway, we navigated it really, really well. Like, I think we did honestly 9.5 out of 10 on the decisions we made during COVID. That put us in a position in early 2021 to close a deal with BMG. So we brought in $50 million. Some of that was secondary, some of that was primary, infused the business and said, we are so, again, believers in in-person fitness, and the pandemic is a moment in time. And we could already see and feel people were anxious to get back in. And we were just like, people are going to come back in droves. Like, they really want to be in person. And our workout really only works in person. We are so community focused. You need a coach, you need an environment. People do this together. So we started growing in 2021 when people were still gradually opening studios and even shutting them down. So we opened 11 more studios in 2021, and then another 22, I believe, last year, with 26 targeted for this year. Um, and I promoted Brian after we got through the pandemic and after we raised that money. I put him in the CEO role, and I moved into the exec chair role and ran the board for the next couple of years. And yeah, when we started looking at our numbers last year in the fall, it was like, this company is not just back to where COVID levels are. Like, we are above and beyond our projections. We are beating numbers 20% every single month. And like, this company is, sellable. And so we tested the market a little bit and, put our confidential information memorandum, hired our bankers, and got in front of some private equity firms, and, got really great feedback, and started to go down the road with a few of them on a little bit more extensive basis, and ended up accepting an offer from Kohlberg last March. I guess we're in May. So we started that process in February, and then just finalized and closed that deal in April. And I completely exited the business. The offer was great. It was the right time for me. I felt confident in the owners. I felt confident in Brian and Nate and Dimple and Sarah and Heidi and all of the team that is there. So it just was like, this is the most opportune time to sell. And I had been gradually letting go of the business since I stepped out of the CEO role. My involvement, was, even though I was still a full-time employee of the company, I was less and less involved with day-to-day operations. And so there was not like this abrupt ending to my relationship with Solidcore. It was like very natural. And it's been awesome. Like, I feel really lucky to have had the exit that I have had in the manner that I did with my partners and my team, and have it be a very positive experience.
That's so fucking baller. Congrats.
Thank you so
How
much.
does it feel?
It feels great. Like, Listen, money to an entrepreneur is a big prize. That's all it is a trophy of you built something incredibly great that is adding value to people's lives that is very valuable financially. So it's like the ultimate award, right? It's not so much about the money, it's about I did a really good job at what I said I was going to do. I got great returns from my investors. I shared some of my proceeds with my employees and like I feel really great about it. And I also know that it's like, I'm just even more excited to keep building and keep growing. Like, there's not a part of me that's like, oh my God, great, that's done. Like, I'm ready to go sit on the beach and do nothing.
No part of you wants to just chill for a little?
Literally none. Like after the Solidcore deal got done, everybody was like, "Oh my God, are you going on vacation? You celebrating?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? This took up so much of my life. I have neglected ambition. I have neglected my podcast, like my consulting, my investing. Like I'm just now ready to focus on some of these other areas that have not been getting my professional attention. So I love what I do. I love again creating. I love building. I love community. And so it never feels like I'm working. I just feel like I'm living my life.
How about travel? Like you have no interest in going all around the world now that you have the time and capital?
Not really. I mean, listen, I like to travel, but I like to contribute. And I think sometimes, listen, there's a lot to be learned through travel, don't get me wrong. But I also think with too much travel, you end up being a spectator a lot and not contributing. It's sort of on the receiving end of everybody else, working and you're just, again, consuming. And I'm not someone who watches TV. Like, sure, I'm on Instagram and stuff like that, but I really balance and pay attention to how much am I consuming versus how much am I contributing and building and what makes me feel good. And it's hard to build community when you're traveling and bouncing all over the place. I like to play a lot of beach volleyball. And so I like even build community around that. Like, I got a ton of my friends involved. I've gone to 4 beach volleyball camps, adult volleyball to try to get better. Like that's really what fills my cup up. And I think sometimes traveling can feel a little bit again transactional and just you're on the receiving end of a lot of other people's work. I guess does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned your relationship to your dad and his gambling addiction and sort of how you saw yourself in the homeless the people with homelessness that you were working with, and then sort of your relationship to exercise and fitness as a way to kind of overcome some of those shadow parts of yourself. What is your relationship to like mental health and addiction for you, and how have you like where else are you what are you still working on and in development with as you kind of leverage passion for entrepreneurship and your passion for fitness as a way to like feel like you're the best version of yourself?
Yeah, great question. I am a big believer in therapy. I have gone through bouts of therapy, working through certain issues. First one, working through, a complicated breakup. The second one, working through some, family identity stuff. And then I've done couples therapy. My boyfriend and I do couples therapy just to make sure we're ahead of conversations. My boyfriend lost his dad when he was 16. And I have, my parents, even their gender roles. My dad still struggles with some gambling addiction. And, my dad really has never been the provider in our family at all. My dad really doesn't have a dime to his name, to be honest. I support my father. And I have a mom who lived in her masculine, meaning she was the provider. She was the one who like ran the household. She was the strict one. She called the shots. And so I think it's really important to look at the emotional inheritance that we all receive from our upbringing and decide what are those things that, even though abnormal or things that maybe have caused hurt and pain that we're grateful for. Like, I love who I am and I love what I've done with my life. and I wouldn't be who I am without my family dynamic. So I first start with that sense of gratitude, but that doesn't mean that, I didn't see some very unhealthy, bad behavior that I had learned to emulate over the years that I needed to, work on. For example, my mother has a very difficult time, if not impossible time, apologizing. And I realized I had adopted that habit, and it was causing havoc in my personal and professional relationships. And I needed to figure out where that was coming from, and learned that, like, gosh, I learned that from my mom, and that's caused havoc on our relationship. And so, same with my dad. Of how does that dynamic of my dad never supporting and providing for me, and now I'm the one who supports and provides for him. Like, where does all that stuff come from, that I was so driven to be, an entrepreneur, and always knew, like, John, I mean, for me, guys, like, I'm going to be a millionaire. And I didn't do that out of like, oh, I want to be flashy and like make sure people know I have money. Like, I am the least flashy person you will ever meet with a high net worth. Like, it's just not important to me. But it was freedom from pain. That's sort of how I viewed it. And that's what was driving me for so long. Of I never wanted to experience the pain that financial deprivation caused in my family from my dad's gambling addiction. I never wanted money to do that for me. I wanted to have enough to take care of the problems. People wouldn't have to suffer, and that I could sort of have that solution for myself and people that I care about.
I want to dive deeper into that, but I also want to be mindful of time. So I'm curious how this has all evolved to doing it again and working. What is ambition?
So, yeah, ambition is a fitness and wellness concept. And one of the amazing things about boutique fitness is the community. One of the things that is not so great sometimes is like, you got to go to this place to get spin, you got to go to this place to get yoga, you got to go to this place to get Pilates. And it's all very bespoke. And you're paying a brand new membership, at each particular place. And I thought it was, I thought people were going to, I still do. I'm like, people are going to want offerings embedded in that community where they can feel like they get a little bit more, one, bang for their buck, and two, more education around fitness. And let's face it, there is a lot of like, kitschy sort of boutique fitness that feels like fads, and it's where the cool kids go. And I wanted to provide really educational, sophisticated programming within four modalities that again, people tend to gravitate to. So the four modalities that Ambition offers are athletic conditioning, which is more fit, right? We're really going to work on your endurance in that class and your heart rate and cardio. We offer a pure strength class, which is just, lifting weights, getting strong. We do an athletic flow, which is the same thing that Solidcore did for Pilates, like our athletic flow does for yoga in my mind. Half the time I go to yoga, I'm like, I got half of a workout, half of a stretch, and now I feel like I need to finish both. So we were really doubling down on a heated space that would make people, feel like they don't have to go work out again. And then the fourth modality in that heated room is our recovery class that really works a lot on mobility and flexibility. So we've gotten really amazing feedback. I've partnered, my chief product officer, Joe Gomez, is, the most talented person in that space. She knows the body and programming better than anybody else I've ever met. And she's really designed incredible programming to help people see the results that they want from the fitness journey that they're on. And I will also say, which is so controversial for reasons I don't know why, I'm so tired of people not being able to talk about their body as it relates to fitness. It's like, I don't go to get a facial and just be like, I'm just here to relax, but like, I don't really care, if you do anything to my face. Like, I'm just here for the mental well-being. And I'm like, yeah, all exercise is going to give you great mental health benefits no matter what you do. But there's a lot of people frustrated out there with not seeing themselves get stronger, not seeing themselves lose weight. That's why people, frankly, end their fitness journey, when they're not seeing something happen for their expectations. And I was one of those people for years. I ran every day and I didn't lift any weights, and I was 25 pounds heavier than I was. I was really frustrated. I was unhappy. And we're like opening up that conversation, that ambition to try to figure out, what are your fitness goals, whether it relates to endurance, performance, flexibility, losing weight, building muscle. Like, we can help you achieve that all here, depending on our modalities and put you on a path to do that. So I just think the whole we can't talk about people's bodies is such bullshit.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. Quick question, and then I want to dive into what you just mentioned about the whole body stuff. Uh, are you doing all these different modalities in one studio space, or are you going to open up multiple studios? Okay, in one space,
Yep.
and
So there,
then
there's all, yep, they're about 5,500 square feet, and there's two studios within the facility. Again, one is non-heated, and it's all done on with our partners from FitBench, which is an incredible product. If you haven't heard of FitBench, and then the other one is a heated room, again, beautifully designed. I don't know if you've spent much time in New York, but like there just isn't a lot of beautiful yoga studios there. And I wanted to provide a really beautiful space where people could get an incredible workout from a yoga perspective. So it's, yeah, it's gorgeous.
and then were you legally not allowed to throw like like your solid core machines, or like a
Oh yeah,
similar type of
I
work?
mean,
Because I would feel like you that would be part of your kind of like holistic approach towards fitness.
but yeah, I started Ambition last year, so I was still highly, equitized in Solidcore and was not going to compete with them in that fashion. So no, there's no reformers, no Svetlana at Ambition at all, and there won't be.
Got it. Got it. Cool. And then, double clicking on what you mentioned about sort of, body shaming and fat shaming and anything related to that is I recently went to an HR conference, and one of the questions that was posed to like an HR audience, head of HR was, how do you promote the relationship between physical wellness and mental health? And one of the women on the panel was like, we don't do that because, we don't want to push people to be towards a certain body type. And we don't promote walks in the morning because we don't want to be ableist. And I thought that was just such a like a cop out answer, and that like fitness and movement are scientifically some of the most effective ways to
Yeah.
improve your mental well-being. And it's sad that we've gotten to a place where we can't even talk about that, or people are kind of going against that and arguing against that because for worry of like offending people's sensitivity.
Yeah, it's the cancel culture stuff that people are afraid of. And if they don't have, I mean, listen, I, had an article written about me in 2020, take down piece, anonymous piece, and, people trying to cancel me. One, you can't really cancel me. I own the majority of my business and like no one can fire me. So one, it's sort of like making yourself a little cancel proof. But but two, like I kind of get why people feel they have to do that, John, because of that. You say one thing that offends two people and they need a sacrificial lamb, to fire to say that they solved the problem. So it's why we've gone so far in that direction. But the reality is like, yeah, physical exercise is really important to our overall health. Like it's the number one key factor to longevity and your health span and living healthy, later in life. So to not talk about that and to not talk about, what are your physical fitness goals. Some people at 70 still want to be able to run marathons. Some people, don't want to do that. They just want to play with their grandkids. So if we ignore that conversation about what we're looking for out of our bodies to be able to do at this time in our life and the future, you can't build a program to help individuals achieve that. It's crazy. So I think it's just foolish to act like we can't have a conversation and frankly help people achieve what they're trying to achieve. And I also think, God, it is okay to some people to say aesthetically, I want to lose weight. Like, what is wrong with somebody wanting to lose weight and look better for them? no one is saying that that particular body type or losing 20 pounds has to be the way that everybody's fitness journey wants to go, but we are all allowed to decide what our own personal body performance and aesthetic want to look like and work toward that.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is like the overfixation on a specific body type. Like I for one, have struggled with my weight and how I want my body to look, and I've kind of gotten the most results when I stopped not stopped caring, but took a more holistic
Mhm.
view on it and just did a lot of the boring stuff and got enough sleep and got enough
Yeah.
water and minimized my stress. Like stress impacts your belly fat. It does, and especially for men. And so I think that is part of where sort of the critique on like over fixation on body type is coming from. I'm curious where else you mentioned like you were a big runner, you didn't lift enough weights. What else in the fitness and wellness world as it comes to like your own, whether it's how you look and feel, have you changed your mind on? Because you've been in and around this world for a while.
Yeah, I mean, one, it's the 100% the lifting weights and lifting heavy weights. It has changed my body dramatically, and I wasn't doing it at all in my 20, actually probably not until my early 30s, that I really start to understand and educate myself around weightlifting, right? I bought into all the bullshit that all the other women do, which is, lifting weights is going to make you bulky, and it's such a bunch of bullshit, right? And the same with solid core, why it's such an effective workout or why any weight training is so effective. When you're on a cardio machine, John, and you're burning calories and it's good for your heart, don't get me wrong. Like we need to take care of our heart, but that's not going to really do anything for building muscle, and muscle, helps you improve your metabolism. So when you're strength training to the point of muscle failure, which is what is recommended, you are literally tearing the muscle fibers. And so your body, just like when you break a bone, right? When I broke my leg, I was so thin, like I couldn't eat enough food because my body was expending all this energy trying to fix and grow my bone back. It's the same thing that actually happens when you tear muscle fibers. Your body's metabolism and your energy, you need much more energy to repair the work that you did because of that micro trauma that you caused in the muscles. But at the end of your cardio session, your burning calories is over. Like whatever it says on the screen, that's it, that's done. Like, but when you lift weights, you get this 24 to 48 hour, depending again on our metabolism, of like bonus time where your metabolism is revved up and doing the work to repair the damage, that the really good damage that you did. So it is the best bang for your buck. If I'm short on time, if anybody only has a little thing, I'm like, do lift weights, lift weights, lift weights, and lift them to the point where your muscles are shaking and you can't like finish your last rep.
And can we do a couple quick rapid fires as we wrap up today? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
All right. I would love people to get a better understanding of who you are, sort of outside of just the business. What's a book you've recommended the most, reread multiple times, or one that has just left a lasting impact on you?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I will say How to Win Friends and Influence People. So that's a really great one. And honestly, Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And the reason for the second one is it talks so much about identity and helps people understand why they do what they do, and why they're so afraid of failure. I think it's so formative for anybody, and it's a very quick read.
Yeah, that's a great one. A favorite product at Trader Joe's or another market that you love that you
Oh
love?
my gosh, and a favorite product. So I don't really shop at Trader Joe's. Whole Foods is right across
Whole
the
Foods.
street from me. Um, there there's a yogurt there. It's called Kite Hill yogurt, and it's all plant-based. And like it's my favorite. Like I eat it every single day. It's dairy free and it's got like 17 grams of protein. I make a parfait and like I literally go to Whole Foods and I take as many of those yogurts as are there. I like take them all. So
uh,
if you're able to at Whole Foods and you don't see it, it's probably because I was there.
you mentioned a purchase. You're not very materialistic, but I'm curious if there has been a purchase under $200 or so that you made in the last 6 months that's provided the most value to you.
This thing.
Oh, nice. Is it a
My
Yeti?
64-ounce Yeti. Yeah, I
Oh, yeah.
drink 2 of these a day. Sometimes I don't, do that, but having this thing and like right in front of me and drinking it, like it ensures I stay really hydrated, which again, super important for overall health in so many ways. So if it's sitting there, you're going to drink it. I take it everywhere.
Um, one thing you're grateful for today.
Um, Gosh, a lot. But okay, one thing I'm grateful for today is um, I think my ability and desire to want to always solve the problem. I don't shy away from solving the problem, and just a couple of things happened today, and I was like proud of myself for wanting to fix the issue, not being afraid of conflict, and like yeah,
Leaning in.
yeah.
Best piece of advice you've ever received.
Ever received? Oh my gosh. So it was from a mentor of mine who used to run the New York Roadrunners. And I was letting her know when I was running back on my feet that I was feeling like, you know, I never get gratitude from people. Like, I never feel like anybody ever tells me good job. And she was like, Anne, if you're going to be a CEO, you need to get that shit from home. And you need to stop expecting it to happen at work. That's not their job. That's your job to make sure your staff feels grateful all the time. But like you need to get that from someplace else. And as soon as I changed my expectations, I was done being frustrated.
Mm. Anyone you look up to and why?
Um, I think I look up to my friends, honestly. Like I don't surround myself with people that I don't respect and admire. And I think if we're not looking up to our friends, we're hanging out with the wrong people. So they push and inspire me to step into the best version of myself on many occasions, and I'm very grateful for them.
Are your friends from childhood, college, or are a lot of your friends like ones that you made in your adult life through
Adult
work?
life,
Yeah,
yeah, adult life for sure.
cool. Any favorite podcast episodes or podcasts that have left a lasting impact on you?
Gosh, you want me to choose one of them? I'll just choose a recent one. It was with, I don't remember who he was speaking to, but it was Scooter Braun.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah,
have you
yeah,
heard of this?
he's
Oh,
the Justin Bieber's agent.
yeah, but you have to listen because and just it'd be the most recent one if you would find it. But his real name is Scott, and he talks about how he forgot about Scott and like really found how much actually accolades Scooter was getting. So he abandoned this part of his identity, and he's really come full circle and speaks so intelligently and sophisticatedly about wealth and success and your relationship with yourself and depression, and how success does not equal happiness, and just sharing his story and his vulnerability. It's really amazing for anybody that's looking for a perspective like that.
Is it his podcast or
No, he was. It's not his podcast, but I think if you just go to the podcast and search for him, it will be one of the most
recent one?
recent ones. I can't remember who the interviewer was, but it was a young British guy in his 20s.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
Okay.
Last two, craziest or most out there thing you do to optimize your well-being.
Craziest or most awesome? I mean, I think some people would say that drinking 2 of these is crazy. Like, every time someone sees this thing, they're like, "Do you drink all of that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I drink hopefully 2 of them."
Yeah.
So, that's the reaction that I get. I mean, I don't do anything nuts. I'm in bed early. If 9 o'clock bedtime is preferred, uh, but I don't do anything out of the ordinary. I do all the regular things, as you said you do: early bed, hydration, I eat a lot of plant-based foods. I work out pretty much every day, get sunshine, like, it's
The
all
boring
these
stuff.
things that make us healthier and happier are like very basic fundamentals.
And then how about your least favorite piece of health advice?
That we can't talk about people's bodies.
Okay, great. And you're awesome. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and sharing your journey. Where can people, follow you, learn more about your work? And I think it's wegotambition.com.
Yeah, that's ambition. And like my website, annemalum.com, has it serves as sort of the conduit to everything I'm working on. So that's a good one. And Instagram is also just Anne Mahlum. I'm pretty active on there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Have a great weekend in San Diego.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.